Hi everybody, and welcome to episode 18 of Livestream Rebels with me, Mark Orr, and Daniel Wilkinson from DW Media. Both of us from DW Media. I feel as if I've got to keep saying that for some reason, just in case people aren't quite on the same page as us. But I don't know why I keep thinking that. But anyway, how are you? Yeah,
I was just going to say it's because it hasn't set in for you yet, so you have to say it as a little buzz of excitement that we both work together. Loads.
Yeah, well, a buzz of excitement. No, it is a buzz of excitement. It is good fun. It is good fun most of the time. But that's like anything, when you're in business. You have your good days and you have your bad days. Anyway, here we are again, a little bit later, as in the week that we should have actually done the live show. We had intended to do one, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and it just didn't quite fit in with timings because I was away. And Dan was up against it with some projects, and we didn't quite manage to fit it in. We were gonna pre-record something, but unfortunately, we just didn't quite manage it because of time constraints. But hey ho, that's the beauty of doing things live. You can do it whenever you want, not when you want to, but whenever you can actually fit it into your schedule. And because things are pretty busy for us at the moment, we can't always guarantee to go live on a particular week or day. Well, we usually it's the same day, a Wednesday, but ultimately we have to sometimes shuffle the weeks around. But that's the way the cookie crumbles, and hopefully our audience will be okay with that. Fingers crossed, anyway.
Fingers crossed.
So what are we talking about this episode, Daniel?
I don't know. No, we are talking about an IMAG job we did, which we do a lot of IMAG jobs now. It wasn't the intention when we started this to talk about IMAG this much, but it just sort of happened this way, weirdly. So this is another IMAG job at an arena. Last time we spoke about an arena, it was Manchester Arena, and it was for a job called 90s Baby Pop. And that was me there on me Todd, and Mark was away gallivanting somewhere, doing better things, not having to load kit in and out of an arena like me, but this time we both went along and we were at M&S Bank Arena in Liverpool, which was the first time. That's it, M&S Banks?
Not Banks, it's just Bank. M&S Bank.
Oh, Bank, okay. So we were at that arena in Liverpool, which was the first time either of us had been to that arena for work, and I think at all. It was very exciting. We had 2 days there, so it was a lot less stress than having to be in and out on one day. We could set up and leisurely walk out on the first night and come back the next day and just know that everything was going to be there ready to go. And yeah, we started to leave quite early in the morning though, which was all right. I was there on time.
Yeah, we were there. We were there on time. We did. We got there, as we said we would, which gave us enough time because we took 2 vehicles down. We won't talk about the vehicles because that's for a future show. So
yes,
you can wait with bated breath.
It's very exciting.
It's going to be pretty exciting, to be perfectly honest with you, for what we can do and the services that we will be able to provide in the future. So we're really looking forward to that, quite excited about it, and we will reveal all as and when we can. I think people have a little bit of an idea, but yeah, we will not reveal it quite yet. Hopefully within the next few weeks we'll be able to talk about this and
fingers crossed
what it means for the future of DW Media, basically. So, but back to Liverpool. Why were we in Liverpool, Dan? Who were we working with?
We were working with a comedian called Paul Smith, who I'd seen on social. I think you'd seen on social media before.
Yeah.
We'd both sort of come across through that. And then obviously this job came through. So IMAG, for those of you who don't know, who haven't watched previous shows, which if you haven't, why haven't you? Were 18 and now you really should have. IMAG is basically, to really simplify it, we bring cameras and we put what's happening on stage a bit closer on the screens. So people at the back can view it. People who are maybe not as close can see what's going on. We make sure that people who are sat really far back have the same experience as people who are sat really close up, is the idea of IMAG. And we've only just got into it in the last year or so. So we're still quite new to the game, but we're really enjoying it. And this was just another extension of that it was a little bit simpler, but it still had its own hurdles, I'd say, with a comedy show. Because you think a comedy show only has one person on stage, it's a lot easier, just track them. But there was a few little bits added on that were just just make it a bit more complex. Why not? So we had to do those, and they were mainly left to Mark, so it's fine.
But that's ultimately kind of what we thrive on, really, is being thrown a curveball or being given an additional challenge to actually come up with a solution to not necessarily a problem, but just a solution to what a client is looking for. So we will talk about that a little bit later on as to what it was that we did additionally on top of just providing the video feeds to the screens. And for those who don't know, who again haven't watched the previous show when we talked about IMAG, that just basically stands for image magnification. So ultimately is taking, what is a big stage and just making it more accessible for people who are in larger venues, so arenas, like we were working this particular one in Liverpool. But it doesn't have to be an arena. It could just be a large venue. We quite often do this stuff for music, music festivals as well, where obviously, people can't necessarily see the artists on the stage very clearly because they're so far away. Because at a music festival, you ultimately get tens of thousands of people in the audience, in the crowd, and not everybody can literally be at the front. So it just helps with that immersive experience so that people can actually see what's going on. And it's something that, as I say, Dan and I are fairly new to, but we really enjoy it because we get to see the show. We get to be part of it at the same time, so we get to be entertained. And in this particular Paul Smith show, we did giggle quite a bit backstage at some of the jokes and some of the things that were going on. Excuse me. I'm suffering a bit with my throat today for some reason. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we actually did to enhance the actual start of the show using the facilities that we had, the cameras that we had, and how we gave it that little bit of edge that I think went down extremely well and gave the audience something else to kind of gear them up and get them ready for the acts coming on stage. So I think what we'll do is transition across to the slides. We'll kind of give you an insight into what our setup was like, what the venue was like, and then the kind of things that we were actually doing for the screens. So we had an extra body with us as well, did we not, at this particular venue, Daniel?
We did. So I'll give a thanks to Ben straight off the bat because he's taken quite a few of these photos we're going to show as well. And he came, I went to college with him and he came along with us for the ride on this one. And he was our cam op for the main tracking post. And Ben does a wide range of stuff. He does photography and video and all that sort of stuff. So definitely go and check out his stuff. I know he's liked the LinkedIn thing, but I don't know if he's watching. So he might be. So he might comment, but we'll see. But yeah, so Ben was running the main camera, and as you can see there, we've got a platform at the back. Now, it's a bit different to the platform we had last time because the platform we had at Manchester Arena was just basically a platform. This one was a bit smaller, so had rails on the side of it and stuff, which made getting up there quite difficult for me because my legs don't operate on high places. So it was just trying to fine once I'm up, but getting up and getting down was just horrible. But yeah, it was fine. So we ran an SDI feed to the back there with that camera on, which we were using an Ursa, which we've just acquired. So we now have one, which is exciting. And yeah, so we had that on there with a 600mm lens on it, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, 600mm.
One of those on it to capture the stuff going on the stage. And Ben did take off his hat. It wasn't that cold the whole way through. And we had it on one of Mark's tripods, just pointing towards the stage, and we were using that mainly for the tracking. And with it being a comedy show, it was a lot nicer than some of the other IMAG jobs we do, where there's multiple people on the stage and we're having to use comms to decide who to track and who to follow and do all this. Whereas a comedy show, one person on stage makes life a hell of a lot easier. So yeah, that was that position. Not much going on other than a camera on a tripod with a few cables coming out of it, and it being powered as well. Don't know if you want to go to the next one, Mark, and we'll see what comes up.
See what comes up, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we haven't ordered these slides in any particular chronological order. We've literally just bunged them into the presentation. So.
Yeah. We just sent each other photos, and then we're just going to have to guess what they come. So this is our Vision Mixer, which you'll recognise from a few other of these streams. Again, if you've watched them, if you haven't, why? You need to watch them. 18 in. So this is our Blackmagic ATEM Extreme ISO mixer. There's a mouthful. Great mixer this. You can have up to 8 inputs coming in and 4 SDI outputs. We got the SDI version instead of the HDMI one. Choice on because I just prefer SDI. It's a bit more reassuring to me than HDMI. And we've noticed that both me and Mark have noticed that over the last year of going to these jobs, it's a lot better having 4 outputs than the HDMI version, which only has 2. And it's just come in really handy just to chuck signals in and out. The reason the minis are so much better than the other studio versions, or the older studio versions that we were using, is these auto scale, which means that if you have a video feed that's, let's say, 1080p 30 frames a second and 1080p 50 frames a second, it will just chuck everything in and just scale it to the right amount and just make sure that everything is the correct signal. Whereas the old ones, you had to throw in the exact feed you wanted. And if you don't have cameras that do the same feeds, it wouldn't work. And I ran into that issue quite often. But these ones are great. So as you can see there, we've got a load of tape on the screens as well. And I think there's a photo later on showing what those are for, so I'll leave that explanation for there. But basically, there it is from the back. I've actually edited this photo, Mark. I don't know if you can tell. I have actually photoshopped it.
Have you? Right.
Yes. For no other reason in particular other than taking out a load of Diet Coke, Fanta bottles, and a Five Guys wrapper for social media usage, because I thought it looked a bit cleaner than what it did with it on. We just broke for lunch and Ben took this photo, which was lovely. But yes, had a few leftovers from there. And I've just ruined the illusion on here, so it's fine. So as you can see at the back of the rack, there was actually a big drape in front of where we were here. So we weren't this exposed during the show, but this was taken before all that was put in. So you can see on the ground there, we've got a few SDI reels. They were really powering the whole thing, connecting all the cameras together to our mixer. And you can see the thing that's a bit more lit up in a bit of a blue way in the middle. That's the back of our mixer where we put all the inputs. So we have like a patch panel on the back that we can plug into. And then these flight cases we have actually fold out into tables, which are great. Gives us a lot of real estate to play with when we're at events, and maybe people don't have space for us to set up. The next investment is definitely going to be chairs. But that problem might be solved with something we'll be telling you about in a few weeks. So yeah, this was the setup we had. Mark's there on his laptop and I'm assisting by staring at it confused. And Mark was running a system called vMix, which he'll talk about a bit later, depending on what the next image is.
Indeed.
It's that one, right.
It's that one where you were talking about the tape.
Yes. So the reason we put tape on it was because originally this job was going to be spec'd with landscape screens, which is basically just what you'd normally use on your phone if you have it like that. However, it was changed to what we do at festivals, which is the portrait screens. So then we need to make sure the images fit a portrait screen. So the actual scaling of that to the video walls are scaled separately. However, on the Blackmagic mixers, we don't have a way of knowing what is and what isn't being shown. So we use tape to crop the images on the screen. So we know that in between those two bits of tape is what's going to be shown. And that came in quite handy. Although there's probably a change I'll make for next time when you're discussing later, Mark, about the cameras at the front of the stage. I'll suggest a change that that we should do for next time, but we'll come to that one. So we had 4 cameras set up for this show. So the one on the left with the 2 bits of tape on it, that was the main camera that was on the microphone. Then you can see on the left-hand screen with all of the things going on, the top left one is the microphone for the main stage. The next one along is one of the PTZs at the front. And then below that, you've got another PTZ. And then on that little 4x4 grid, we've got the audio, which we were providing all the footage from the IMAG to the content creator for the show as well. So we needed to capture scratch audio for him to be able to sync up with the actual audio from it, which was taken out of the desk. So we were just recording basically atmosphere noise, which was just one of the mics from one of the cameras we had turned on, and it just captured what was going on in the room. It's not the best audio in the world, but it's definitely enough to sync it up with the decent audio that's coming out of the sound desks. And then we've also got the ISO stop on there, which it says at the moment, but that was basically just a status for recording. So we knew we were recording the show. And then the 2 black boxes up on top, one of them's actually a feed from a camera crane we had on this job that we weren't switching to live, but were recording for afterwards. And then there was another just blank one because we didn't have that many cameras on this one. And that's really that. Next slide. That's just the tape from a different angle.
Yeah.
And you can see the drapes in the background. The drape, you can see it above the laptop in the corner there. That's now over us, so no one could see us behind there. You may as well go to the next one, Mark. There's not much more to discuss on that one. And I'll let you take over because this is your domain, probably for 2 slides.
I was going to say that this is a bit small, this particular one, so I'm hoping that there's a better image on the next one. Just to give a shout out, so Mark Cram has been watching us on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, I can't get the comments to come through today. For some reason, my browser is just not playing game with me. After having done a previous show on exactly how I get these comments to come through onto the live show so that Dan can see them at the same time as me, it's failed us this time for actually trying to get the comments to come through. But Mark was just mentioning that if we were to use B4 mount lenses on the Ursa, that we would see a big difference in the actual image quality. Well, I'm assuming he says the image quality. He just says you'll see a big difference. The particular Ursa that we've got is currently an EF mount, so we would actually need to purchase an adapter to be able to convert that into a PL or a B4. I think PL and B4 are different. I'm not 100% certain on that. Having not used those particular lenses before, maybe Mark can kind of keep us right on that one, whether PL and B4 are exactly the same. But B4 tend to be broadcast lenses, so you'll see a lot of these being used in television because they just have a lot more functionality that would be ideally suited for this kind of venue where we are quite a distance away from the actual stage, so that we can actually highlight and show the person in the best light possible and get a nice cropped in shot so that people can actually see what's going on. So this was my control station for the cameras that I was running, which are ones that I've talked about before, the robotic cameras, the PTZs, which give us complete control over their positioning from a central control panel or unit, which means that we can put the actual, or we did on this particular occasion, put the cameras on the stage and control exactly where they are pointing and the zoom and also the focus if we want to adjust the focus. They do have quite a good autofocus functionality on these particular cameras. So we had 2 of them, one on either side of the stage, which meant that we could capture the audience basically, and that's ultimately what we did for the first 20 minutes of the show, because the Paul, the actual comedian, has a tendency to interact for the first 20 minutes with the first couple of rows in the audience that are sitting right in front of him. So we ultimately want to be able to show those particular people on the stage as well. Show on the screens, should I say, so that the people at the back can actually see the interaction. Now, obviously, they can't hear necessarily what is going on, but Paul's pretty good at kind of relaying what has actually been said so that everybody within the venue can actually hear and still be part of the actual comedic response that he gives to whatever they've said, which is usually pretty entertaining. I've got to be honest. He literally roasts people in an extremely funny way. So if you ever go to a Paul Smith show, not sure I would necessarily recommend sitting in the front unless you're very thick-skinned and think about what you say to him is ultimately the advice that I would give you. So
yeah.
We've actually moved on. There wasn't another shot. I think there's a slide coming up a little bit later on that kind of gives a bit more of an idea of the PTZ. So this was one of the domains that you were kind of fiddling around with, Dan. So do you want to kind of take the reins on this one?
Nah. Yeah. This is a software called Resolume, which is something that I'm not entirely familiar with yet. I'm going to be blatantly honest with that. I've done a job running it once that was very basic and all the stuff was already set up, and but it's a very powerful software that manages what goes out on the screens basically. So this is where we could put on effects and stuff, and you can see there's sort of a love heart on one of the screens. I'll talk a little bit about what that is in a second, but we were feeding into this software which was going out to the screens, and that basically scales what we're putting out and makes sure it's the right size before it goes to the screen basically. And there's a load of other effects in it as well. There's a lot of visual effects you can put on screens. There's a lot of there's a lot to play around with in there. It's all control screens live is the idea of it, and the company that makes it also have a few other bits of software as well. But it's a very powerful software that we are only scratching the surface of, and we have only used a couple of times, and it's still getting used to it a lot, which is something that we just need to do. But it's very popular in the industry for managing screens and managing visual effects for live events. So you can see there the love heart. Now, what we had this was sort of the layout of the venue. So we had the stage there with Paul on it, and then we had the two screens either side. He's not a ghost. That's just because I can't take a decent photo in low light, apparently. It's not like he was just illuminating through the whole show. So during people coming in and during intervals, it sometimes gets a bit boring if you're a member of the audience, because there's an outgoer on the stage and all you're doing is listening to some music and chatting to people who you might not even like with you. Hopefully that's not your situation, but it might happen. And so we had PTZs at the front that Mark was controlling. And we also had a lot of graphics, and the other ones are definitely not repeatable if we ever want anyone to have anything to do with us on this podcast, on this stream, whatever it's called at the moment. So I'm not going to say what else we had on it. If you go and see Paul Smith, or if you were there, you know exactly what was on them. And if you search Instagram and have a look at some photos, you will also find what they were. But they were basically just things that were funny, and we pushed one on the screen and then put a funny thing in front of them.
So basically, it was an overlay. Then, so I would control the camera to an audience member, and then we would overlay something that had almost like a meme, so that would have something funny that was the audience member was the butt of the joke, basically. So, but it got some laughs around the actual arena, which was good. We had a laugh, which was great. We thoroughly enjoyed ourselves with that bit. People were really bought into it, to be perfectly honest. Nobody got upset about it. And some of the comments that we put on there, that we were fed to put on there. I have to admit to that, it wasn't necessarily all our doing.
It was.
So it was cleared by the management, and it was quite cutting sometimes, but absolutely everybody was up for it. I think at the end of the day, if you're at a Paul Smith gig, you've kind of got to be. If you are upset by any of the stuff, then you are definitely at the wrong venue and the wrong gig. That's for sure. Because everybody understands his style. There's enough of it around social media for everybody to kind of understand what his style is. So if that doesn't suit you, don't go.
And it was great. It was a great laugh over the weekend, and it was actually Paul that started, because we were only going to have Kiss Cam, and he came in and was like, "No, you should have this," which was where all the rest of it came from. So yeah, he was a driver behind that as well, which was good. And he was very funny. That's just that same shot, just with a bit more people in it. It was a full arena. I don't know why I took two shots with one wider than the other. But yeah, you can sort of see. You can't because it's changed, but you could sort of see Ben. I'm trying to point, but I realise my finger's not on everyone else's screen.
Yeah.
On the right screen, if you look under that, you can see a little figure. That is Ben operating a camera, and we were under the left-hand screen.
Yeah.
So, go on, Mark.
Yeah, so this it's a difficult shot to kind of see, to be honest with you, but you should be able to see a lens there, and that is basically one of the PTZ cameras that we had that was at the front of the stage, looking out onto the audience, and this was what we were using for relaying the audience member who was being roasted by Paul in the first 20 minutes. So they were appearing on the actual screens as well, and it was also part of what we were supplying to the videographer who was doing the actual media coverage for the actual gig as well. So these are two robotic cameras that, as I say, I control from my little control station, which means that I can point them pretty much anywhere, and they have a really, really good zoom on them. So I could pick out somebody who was in the back of the arena, because these have something like a 30 times zoom on them, optical zoom, not a digital zoom as well. So obviously it keeps the quality. When you are zoomed right in, obviously you will get some issues with vibration, because they then become really susceptible to any kind of vibration. So you have to be careful where you position them. So when they're zoomed right in. So having them on a stage is not necessarily where we would put them if we were doing a music festival, because obviously we would then be subject to vibration from the bass bins of the actual audio system. But we are going to be probably getting some new clamps for these that will allow us to put them on the trussing on the side of the stage, which then is actually completely separate from the stage itself and shouldn't be hampered at all by the actual the bass and the vibration from the speakers coming through. So that's something to kind of look forward to for when the festival season kicks off as well. So Mark's put another comment about PL and B4. They're slightly different, but you can get Metabones to convert the mount. Yeah, which I'm fully aware of. So the Metabones things are just handy little adapters that will allow you to use the two different lens connectors, adapters, however, not really adapters, but the connectors, because different camera can't even get my words out. Different camera manufacturers. That's hard. It's a hard sentence to say. Camera manufacturers use different lens connectors, so sometimes you have to use adapters to be able to switch between different styles of lenses. I've got adapters for some of my Sony stuff that will allow me to use Canon lenses, etc. I think have you not got one on your ESR?
I have, because when they got out the ESR, they put a different bloody mount on it, so I had to get a EF mount, which was just another cost to buy on the camera. But it was worth it, to be honest, for the quality that they do and being able to use the lenses I currently have and having a bit more flexibility. It added a lot to it. But yeah, and I will say Mark Cram has, if you've watched one of our previous shows about Reggae Land, he was one of the people helping us on that. Well, he was the other person helping us on that, actually, because me and you were both elsewhere.
We were that weekend, yeah.
And Mark's great. He does a lot of this stuff as well, and a lot bigger stuff than we're doing. So thank you very much for the advice, Mark. And we'll definitely be in touch at some point because we need to have a catch up properly, I think, between all three of us.
Yeah, definitely something we need to do. We've been promising this for a while, and I think it's about time we actually, excuse me, drew a line in the sand and kind of got Mark in and had a chat with him. So, and I'm quite jealous of some of the stuff that Mark's done because I'm a huge rugby fan and I know he's done a lot of stuff at Twickenham. So, yeah, I'm quite jealous of that. Although I would still want to watch the game, if you know what I mean. But hey-ho, beggars can't be choosers. But so I think this is just another shot of our control center. So the mixing desk, the video screens, and that is a nice silhouetted shot of my good self there. So let's move on to the next one. Oh, God, I'm appearing on a lot of these, Dan. What's going on? This is not on. You don't appear to be in any of them.
Yeah, because I've cut the ones out of mine because my tits were showing.
You see, that's really brought it up to gutter level now, hasn't
it? This is just a bit of a bigger shot that shows what that desk looked like, and I've left the Fanta in that one. So we can see that the Mark has got his laptop there on top of his switch kit, which has a PoE switcher in it as well as a power adapter, and then the Blackmagic kit there that is all plugged in and illuminated. And then just behind us, that other kit is all of UK Events Group's kit, which has, I believe, their power distribution boxes behind there, and just to the right of where that image is will be all the screen tech. And there was a lot of, I think, RF mics there as well, if I'm right, or was that the other side of the stage? Possibly. But there was a lot of that side.
Well. Yeah, I think it was that side. So their scalers for the screens were there as well. And just to kind of give people an insight as well, when Dan talked there about my switch facility, what he's relating to is that these cameras, these PTZ cameras that I run, are something called NDI, so network device interfaces. So they basically run on an Ethernet cable. So they are powered from the actual Ethernet switch that runs everything. So that means that we don't have to actually run power cables to them, so mains cables. We can literally just run an Ethernet cable and it will power and control them. Now, because NDI has a slight latency to it, so that means that the signal that goes out to the switcher is a little bit delayed just because of how the infrastructure of NDI works. What we do is we also connect an SDI cable to them. So that SDI feed goes directly into Dan's ATEM mixer, which means that we are getting no latency whatsoever running off the SDI cable. But I still control them from my system, but the video feed actually goes direct into Dan's switcher for when he does his vision mix. So really handy way to do things, and just means that you aren't necessarily stuck having to run power cables anywhere. But it does mean that you've got to run two cables, which is not the end of the world, to be honest with you. If we were running a full NDI setup, then we wouldn't even need the SDI cables. We could just run the video feeds from the NDI side of things, because it will power and it will also distribute the audio and video simultaneously over an Ethernet cable. And obviously Ethernet cables can do quite long runs. And for this particular one as well, this was the first time I'd actually used excuse me, longer cables, and we'd actually put a PoE extender in there just to make sure that we weren't getting any drop signals, because it was quite a distance to one side of the stage to the other to feed the camera and control the camera. So that just made sure that we weren't losing any connection by using the extender, which is literally just a plug-in device that connects two Ethernet cables together. It gives you a much longer run. You can get up to about I think when I tested it, I got about 150 meters. I
Yeah.
think it would be pushing it to get any further than that, to be honest with you. But that's still quite a distance for the majority of this stuff. If we wanted to run further, we'd probably have to be looking at, well, for any of our cameras, really, we'd be having to look at fiber, which is quite an investment. But that is something that we potentially may be looking at
Yeah.
doing in the future. So, don't know who these two handsome chaps are.
That's just me looking overly concerned at a camera crane.
Yeah. Why
Yeah.
concerned? I think the concern was why we're using this for this particular project. But hey,
Yeah. Well, the reason we were using it was to grab some promo stuff. So it wasn't necessarily for the screens, because there wouldn't have been much to go on the screens with that. No one was up and dancing or anything like that. There wasn't much activity in the crowd other than a load of laughter. So we were using this to get some promo shots as and when things happened on stage. There was a big exit and all that sort of stuff from Paul, and all that. So it was really used to capture that. So it was only used about 4 times over the whole weekend. I think twice a show, probably. Yeah. And again, this isn't a massive camera crane. This isn't, something massive for us that we use. We hired this in, but it was just something we needed for this show. And yeah, we had a Ronin on the end of that with a EOS R running, which was plenty enough for what we needed for the promo shots. And back to you for vMix.
So this just gives you a bit more of an insight into kind of how I was running the 2 cameras for the front of stage. So that these were at this particular juncture, they were locked into just the audience. So this was pretty much for B-roll footage for the actual videographer that we were sending to him. That these weren't being shown on the stage screens at all at this particular point. Excuse me. Because ultimately, the audience don't necessarily want to see themselves when the show's actually on, unless there's some interaction going on. So these were just locked off shots, and that, as I say, will just be used as B-roll for the media guy who was doing the video for Paul as well. But this is some software called vMix, which is what allows me to run the cameras and control the cameras. Well, I don't necessarily have to do it directly through there, but I choose to do that, and that allows me to, excuse me, have a good handle on exactly what I'm doing and where I'm going. So when we were doing the Kiss Cam, for instance, I had control of the cameras on either side of the actual audience, so I would zoom in and position it to somebody within the audience, and then we would do that overlay that we talked about in Room that just allowed us to have a little bit of additional humour injected into the pre-show shenanigans, shall we say, when everybody's getting settled in and getting their drinks and things. But this is a really, really powerful piece of kit, and this is the actual software that is running this live show today. It's exactly the same thing that allows us to run the cameras, bring the slides in, push the feed out to the distribution platform that we use to syndicate it across all the social media platforms that we're currently going live on as well. So very, very handy piece of kit. And as Dan mentioned earlier, we had Ben positioned on the front of house camera who was actually tracking Paul the comedian, and this was the camera that we were actually using for that. So do you want to talk about this bit?
Yeah, so this is a Blackmagic Ursa. This is a camera that we've picked up recently. Had it plugged into power, which is why there's no V-mount battery on the back. Don't worry, we hadn't forgotten. So this was a cracking camera to use for this. And, with being so early on in sort of doing this type of stuff with IMAG and stuff, going out and buying lenses and sometimes fitting rentals and into client timeframes and budgets is difficult. So this is what we're using for this job. So cracking camera. This Ursa really did impress me. We got it secondhand. And it was absolutely cracking for this job. What it allowed us to do is, because it was a Blackmagic camera, we can control it separately. So we didn't on this job because there was nothing needing to be controlled really, because everything was preset. If it was a festival job where there's constant light changes because of the day getting darker and, a lot of other stuff happening with the sun and the clouds and all this sort of stuff, it would be a bit of a different story. But for this one, we didn't have that control set up, but we could by just running another cable to it. So we had this all up, and then you can see on the safety marker on the screen as well. On the screen, there's like a little grid. We had that set up for Ben, so he would know what's in frame and what's going to the screen. I think there's a better shot of that later on as well. I'm not sure if it's the next image or in 5 images time. But that was there set up on that tripod. And yeah, it was just showcasing what was happening on the stage, and it gave a really up close look. And the video footage that I've seen from that shot looked really good as well. And I was impressed with that camera's quality. So, because the previous job we had to rent one. And then this one was just going to be, because it was 2 days and the only place we could rent one from was Sheffield. It meant that I might have to drive back down on a Monday after getting back to, so it was just easier just to sort of have that discussion and invest in one, since we are doing more of this work. So yeah, that's that camera. Not much to speak about on that one, because it is just a camera pointing at a stage. Very simple. There it is. There's a shot. So you can see sort of in a blurry background of the screens where Paul Smith was actually being shown to by us. And you can see there that time code is completely out. Sorry, I've just realised that. On the Ursa screen, because I haven't played around time code on it, so the time code's completely just random on it. Very, very weird. But that was the camera we had set up there, and you can see the frame. The frame on the Ursa we'd actually set up to be slightly smaller than what was going out to the screen, just so Ben knew that he could get him in that shot and still have a bit of wiggle room on either side, which is a comment that he made that was beneficial for him. So that was good. And actually in the Ursa's control software, you can set how big you want those guidelines to be, which is really useful. So we'd custom set up all of those. So it was a really good camera, really smooth, got some really good quality, and you can see a bit of red around Paul Smith there as well. That was actually the focus peaking, so we knew what was in focus, and we could make sure that everything was in focus. And with this remote software as well, we were under the left. If you look at the screen on the left, we were under there. I could be sat there, or me and Mark were sat there, and we could have controlled focus, white balance, ISO, shutter speed, everything remotely. And we could also set focus at different points remotely. We could color grade it remotely. We could have done everything. The only thing we couldn't do is operate it unless we put a PTZ. But for this type of thing, you want really to have an operator. Because Paul was around the stage constantly, one end to the other. So it made life a lot easier having someone manned on that position.
Yeah. And just because of the way that the actual screens are cropped for portrait, it just means that, having a manned camera just means that you are more likely to be able to track them effectively, because certainly Paul was quite often almost running across the stage at times. So being able to do that with a PTZ camera would be a little bit more challenging. So having somebody actually manning the camera is always a better option for these kind of gigs, to be perfectly honest with you. But the beauty of running Blackmagic equipment is literally what Dan's just kind of alluded to there, is that we can control so much of the stuff remotely. So it means that we haven't necessarily got to put as much pressure on the camera operator to be constantly adjusting things. They can, in like this instance where it's quite a tight crop, they can spend most of their time literally just, focusing, for the want of a better word, on tracking the actual performer. And we, as I say, could have been actually adjusting all the settings as and when necessary. But that's the beauty of being able to tap into the Blackmagic ecosystem. Just gives you a little bit more control, until you kind of go to a lot of the higher end stuff that would just be way out of our budget, to be perfectly honest with you. But it just gives us a bit more flexibility to do these kind of things. So hopefully that's given people a good insight into what we got up to with something slightly different, and an IMAG job that we hadn't done before, but there is definitely scope to do more. So if anybody has an event that they're looking for support with IMAG stuff, if it's a comedian, if it's a music festival, if it is something, a conference, and you want the ability to have that talent be projected onto screens, then by all means get in touch and we can have a conversation about it. So that's kind of brought us to the end of this episode. So hopefully it's been insightful for people. We love talking about this stuff. Yeah, okay, we get a little bit technical about stuff at times, but at the end of the day, it's our passion. It's what we love to do. And if you have any questions because it's you haven't quite understood how this would fit into something that you were planning to do, then by all means we are always happy to have a conversation about it, or to go in more in depth if there's something that you're not quite sure that we've covered, you didn't quite understand, you want us to kind of go a little bit more in depth about how we do something. That could definitely be food for thought for a future episode. So I think we'll kind of call it a day for this episode, Dan. So we should see you in a fortnight's time. We don't know what we're going to be covering yet, but we've got a couple of things up our sleeves that we kind of want to cover. So hopefully we can get things up and running and ready for that. So keep an eye out on our socials. If you're watching the replay, don't forget you can still ask questions. We will respond to them, and we will then endeavour, if you've asked something that is pertinent to a future episode, we will cover in that future episode. So all that remains is for us to say have a great rest of this week and next week until we see you again. And Daniel, don't do it. Don't do it.
I'll stream you later. I'll stream you later.
It's a good job you're in a different location to me. If you were in the next room, I would have come through and bludgeoned you with a hammer. Definitely. So anyway, take care, everybody, and speak soon.